Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Releasing the Trauma podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Diana Lockett, and we're going to talk about how to relax your nervous system in order to heal the trauma response. So, Diana, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here, and I love this topic. It's one of my favorite topics to speak about.
Well, great. It's not something that we've really covered on the show. So I am actually very interested to dive into it. But before we do, tell the listeners a little bit about you, about your backstory.
Okay, so professionally, I am Canada's only realignment coach, and realignment coaching is a coaching methodology that allows one to realign mind, body, spirit, trauma responses, longings, desires, so that we can find more joy in our lives. So my program is called Realign to Thrive, and I want my clients to go from barely surviving to being able to thrive in their lives, and nothing has to change in the external world for that to happen. So it's a very deep inner embodied shift that's required, and mindset shift. I have also experienced quite a bit of trauma in my life. And a lot of it, I was very high functioning and not even realizing that I was running PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in my system. In fact, most people would look at me and they would refer to me as having experienced post-traumatic growth. And that's because I was very high functioning and able to take the experiences in my life and use them as stepping stones to greater good, greater awareness, taking it into my own work. And I realized that that was very helpful. It was very helpful for me from a career perspective. And there's still a lot of deep, and there continues to be some deep inner work that has to come through me as well. My training in terms of trauma training has come through very deep embodied practices. So I have trained as a coach with Hard IQ, which is an organization in Amsterdam, and also a variety of other modalities that look at the bottom-up approach to dealing with trauma. Bottom-up meaning from the body versus top-down, which is what we consider traditional talk therapy.
Wow. Okay. So, excuse me. So bottom up. So we start with the body as opposed to what's in the mind. Is that correct?
It is. And I mean, ideally, we're doing both. So here's what trauma is. Trauma isn't what happens to you. Trauma is what remains from what happened to you, the scars of what happened to you. Right. And trauma is amplified when we are isolated in our trauma. In other words, we don't have someone to talk about. We retreat. No one understands. Our parents don't have the capacity. We don't tell anybody. That leaves the trauma, and we are meant to be interrelational beings. And when we become so independent that we decide we're going to just deal with this ourselves, put it out of our minds, move on, or often what happens is it's not even in our mind. We don't even have an explicit memory of the event. Then we store it as trauma in the body, and it gets stored in the nervous system, which is the communication network between the body and the brain.
So what happens in the nervous system when we have that trauma? How does that work?
So one of the ways that I like to describe it is our nervous system becomes kinked at various times when we have been unable to process or digest or work through events that have happened to us. The nervous system gets kinked or shut down. If you think of a garden hose, you kink the garden hose and it stops the flow of water. Essentially, that flow is your life force. It's your energy, it's your joy, it's your access to the full capacity of the human potential that you are. And so we kink it down. Now, a lot of the times people don't even realize that this is happening, and they go on with their life, and they can be very high functioning and do some really great things in the world and in their lives. But when they get very busy, and those are all what we call defensive strategies, ways that we can move away from feeling because the feeling is very uncomfortable. So we create these defensive strategies of getting busy, of being focused on what we need to do, on distracting ourselves. And we all do this. We all have different numbing strategies. When we allow ourselves to slow down, we start to feel into our nervous system. Now, I'm also a yoga teacher trainer. I run teacher training programs for yoga instructors. So the language that we use in that environment is the language called chakras, which are the energy centers of our body. When any part of our chakras or nervous system are shut down, we don't have access to our full life force. In other words, we don't have access to the full completeness of who we are. Now, we are born complete. We are born whole human beings, but we shut down parts of ourselves because we're not able to deal with it, or we don't have support to deal with it. Now, before the age of 18, we don't have what we call 18 months. We don't have explicit memories. Explicit memories are memories where we can sort of timestamp and recall factual events. We don't have those before the age of 18 months. And part of it is because our hippocampus is not fully developed, which is part of the brain that's related to the reptilian center of the brain. When we are in a trauma event, the hippocampus also shuts down. And so that's how some people don't have explicit memories of their trauma. But the body keeps the score. This is a term that Louise Hay coined. The body keeps the score. In other words, the body remembers.
Right.
So all of a sudden, you're an adult and you either see someone, hear something, smell something, have someone respond to you in a particular way, and it elicits a response in you that just seems like way out of context, like over the edge, and you don't know where this is coming from. It's possibly an implicit, in other words, an in the body experience that remembers, but it doesn't have a memory to attach to it. So the work with trauma is to integrate the implicit memories, the body memories, with current day adult capacity. In other words, we cannot change the past, but as adults, we can reparent and we can start to heal the parts of our body, nervous system, energy centers, emotional body that were not able or didn't have the capacity to heal at the time that an event happened.
Wow. Okay. You were talking about certain smells or things that trigger a response, but not necessarily a memory. And it got me thinking about there was a time where I was out and about. I don't know what I was doing, but I smelled like a lotion, and it instantly triggered, like anxiety. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time. I finally was able to pinpoint where it came from, and it came from a negative experience I had at a babysitter when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just so weird how I'm an adult just going about doing my thing, and all of a sudden I smell somebody's lotion, and I'm like, what's going on? Because now all of a sudden I'm in a heightened arousal state, and so it's funny how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say for your listeners that we don't actually have to go looking for those explicit memories. We can just recognize that there's something coming up in our body that's asking for attention. And as an adult, we can give it attention. So one of the ways that we can give it attention is through movement, sound, breath, or touch. Because trauma occurs very often when we're left alone to try to deal with something that's happened to us. We didn't have a parent that was there to hold us and reassure us and help us to process for whatever reason, or another adult. So being in connection with another, receiving loving touch, a really deep hug, having some deep breaths that help to regulate the nervous system, and we call that parasympathetic nervous system. And we might also want to do some other movement that perhaps activates a little bit of the sympathetic nervous system, which might seem a little contrary or contradicting, but we want to remove that energy from the body at the moment that it shows up. So it might mean that you have to pull up a little bit of anger. You might have to push against a wall, have someone place their hands against yours and push against them and say no and create a boundary, because anger is requiring boundaries. And fear is requiring movement. So there's lots of different strategies that one can take to help release this from the body as it shows up. Because people don't have the skills to do that or don't know to do that, what they do is they either talk through it, which doesn't help release it from the body, or they just numb it. Oh, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. I don't know what this is about. I'm just going to go watch Netflix, have a drink, distract myself. When
Right.
this is an opportunity, when something shows up in the body, it's an opportunity for healing. And all healing has its time. We can't force it. And when it shows up, it's literally like grace knocking at you saying, sweetheart, it's time. You're ready. You can do this. And the greatest thing you could do is reach out for someone to come and be with you, and to do whatever your body feels like it needs to do at that moment. So we call it following the body urges. Does the body need to move gently? Does it need to move aggressively? Does it need to make deep sounds? Does it need to cry? What is your body needing to do in this moment? And again, you don't even have to necessarily know what the memories are, although talk therapy will sometimes help to retrieve that, as well as to change the narrative or the experience of the story through talk. But I'm really about the body work, and then the two of them combined can be really helpful for trauma release and trauma healing.
Well, absolutely, because talk therapy is more for the mind, whereas what you're doing is more for the body, and trauma is stored in both places, right?
Well, so the trauma gets locked in the brain in a way, because because of the hippocampus shutting down, we lose the memories. We don't create a memory imprint of it. So it's literally locked away. And one of my teachers calls it literally it's like a ghost that's just floating around somewhere in you, but you don't know where it is. You don't know what it is, but you know there's something there. We can't go into the brain and retrieve something that's not imprinted or grounded in a particular location, but we can move the body to help to release, so that we don't keep going into these loops of emotional, energetic responses that we can't put our finger on, and we end up reacting, and it starts impacting all of our relational opportunities, our relationships with other people.
So you don't feel that our traumas, the emotions, and all of that gets stored in our body as well? Or
yes.
Okay.
No, for sure. So I was speaking to the mind piece, but absolutely.
Gotcha.
The body part of it is what my teacher calls the somatic ghost. The somatic ghost, it's like it just kind of sneaks in when you least expect it. And part of the integration and a lot of the work that I do is what I call dual awareness. So it's recognizing, oh my goodness, there's this part of me that's like feeling something in my body. So here's what I like my clients to do, and what I do is I identify the sensation. So you talked a few minutes ago about anxiety. And so anxiety is a mental concept. It's a label. And what I'll have my clients do is go into the body and feel, what are the sensations? Sensations are the language of the body. So if you were to use the term anxiety, what does anxiety feel like in your body? Does it feel like tension in your shoulders? Does it feel like this buzziness through your chest? Does it feel like shallow breathing? Do you see the difference? So we're using language to describe the sensations, because then we're not attached to the label. The research shows that when we can attend to the sensations and give them a voice, the language, they can start to move within 90 seconds. That's really fast. Versus getting caught up in the mind concept, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. And then we don't know what to do with that anxiety.
That is fascinating. Because I'm sitting here trying to figure out, okay, what does anxiety feel like? And all I can come up with, it feels like anxiety.
You know what we can do? We can do a little practice at the end. So I have a realignment practice, realign to thrive practice that we can do. That's really helpful, not just for trauma, not just for anxiety, but it just as a daily practice to get really, really in tune to what your body is telling you. And then when you practice this, I do it with the intention to bring up 3 questions, 3 inquiries. What does your intuitive wisdom want you to know right now? Like, what does your body and mind want you to know? What are you grateful for? And what do you need? So we end this practice with these 3 questions. We'll do it in a moment. The other part I want to talk about, we talked about dual awareness being recognizing that part of you that's in what we would call a triggered state. In other words, there's a body response coming up. Usually it's a younger state. Usually it's a younger part of yourself. And what happens is, because we can't make sense of it, we don't have explicit memories, we start trying to bend reality and create a new narrative. Well, I'm feeling like this, so it must be that person's fault, because why else would I be feeling this way? And so we start to recreate our reality with stories and narratives that may not be true. And it's a younger version of us that we can't yet put a handle on or understand. So recognizing that it's a younger version of you and that there's some sensations moving is one of the parts. And then the other part, and I teach my clients to speak about the parts of themselves. So we're not attached to the totality. This is who I am. I'm a trauma survivor. I'm experiencing anxiety. No, there's a part of me, a younger part of me, that hasn't integrated some of the trauma that I've experienced, and that can easily get triggered and have somatic or body responses. And then there's a part of me that's an adult that can recognize that. So as the adult recognizing it, you can witness what's happening. You can watch what's happening, sort of separate a little bit from it. And then in that moment, you get to reparent yourself. So what does your younger self need? So we go back to, what are the sensations you're feeling and what do they need to be expressed to help release them from your body?
Okay. So it's definitely working with our inner child.
There's inner child, and I'm not even necessarily focused on what was the experience of the inner child, just what does that child need now?
Right.
Call them in. What do they need? What are they feeling and what do they need? And if a child is or as an adult, if you're feeling fear is like an immobilized state. And as a child, if we're in fear, we're not usually in fight or flight, which is like moving, aggressing, fighting what's happening.
Right.
We're usually in a collapsed state. We're usually in an incapacitated state. And so when we experience fear as an adult, like, do you freeze like a deer in headlights? Is that your natural response? Well, if you had trauma, that very well may be. If you had trauma at an early age and you don't have explicit memories, you will probably freeze. So what the release of the body would be to bring movement to that. So shake your body, move your legs, run or do knee ups, something to move the energy through your body and to move the emotional energetic experience through your body. Versus if you're angry, anger needs boundaries. And that's where you would find a wall or someone else's hands and push against them, or let out the sounds that are maybe really primal. Make a deep squat, get your body low to the ground, and just release the sounds that need to come out. These are practices that have not been very welcomed in our society. And so what happens when they're not welcomed is we create what we call shadows, which are the disowned parts of ourselves. And we don't allow ourselves to feel these. We make them wrong. And shadows is when we make these things wrong about ourselves, we hide them. Mm-hmm. So what I'd love to do is take you through a realignment practice right now, if we can, for like 2 or 3 minutes. And
Sure.
If your audience is listening and able to close your eyes, please, if you're driving, just listen, and you can do this later. But if you're able to just come into a state where you can close your eyes. And so this is the practice that I do as the beginning practice to recognize what's alive in your body. What somatic experiences are present in parts. So we don't define ourselves. We are not our body. We are not our feelings. We are not our thoughts. We have parts that make up the whole of who we are. So as you feel yourself now, wherever you happen to be sitting or standing, I'll invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose. And exhale with a loud sigh. Do that a few times. Yes. So do it a few times as I keep talking. That exhalation with an audible quality tones your vagus nerve, which is related to parasympathetic or calming nervous system. Now, if you're in a state of collapse or freeze, you're not going to go right to the calming nervous system. You're going to have to take a step back into what we call the activated sympathetic nervous system. So you might find that you don't want to go right to relaxation. You might want to activate a little bit of anger or agitation first and then release that to get to relaxation. But for this practice, let's just focus on deep breaths in through the nose and out with an audible exhalation. Beautiful. And as you continue to breathe, the realign is an acronym. And the R in realign stands for remember. And it's for you to remember, all of you who are listening, that no matter what has happened to you and no matter what you've done, you are a miracle and essentially absolute goodness at your natural state. No matter what you've done or what's happened to you, you are still a miracle. That the odds of you being here are statistically zero, and yet you're here. And you're not here necessarily in spite of everything you've gone through, but you're here listening to this because of everything you've gone through. So I'd love for you to place a hand on the center of your upper sternum, right up above just below your collarbones, between them. This is your energetic heart. And then take a deep breath, feel your hand expand, your heart expand, and deep exhale. The E in realign. So REAL spells real. This is how we get real. We remember our goodness. The E is explore your body. What are the sensations in parts that you notice? So you might go to whatever calls your attention. Maybe it's your head, your shoulders, your back, your belly, your chest, your feet, your legs, your hips, your eyes, your ears, your nose, whatever calls you. And I want you to say to yourself, a part of me notices that. So the E is explore, you go to that part. And then the A is allow and acknowledge, a part of me notices that. And then the L in real is let it be. So you don't have to change anything, you just acknowledge it. And then notice another part. What is another part that you notice? So part of me notices that my right hip is heavier than my left hip. I don't have to change it, I just notice. And a part of me notices that my mouth is dry. So these are somatic sensations, body sensations. And you do this a few times, just noticing what comes to your awareness. Each time, letting it go, non-attaching to it. In other words, there's nothing to fix or change. There's nothing broken. You simply have been unable to integrate all the parts of you to recognize your wholeness, which is your birthright. Now I mentioned 3 questions, 3 queries that come when you're in this relaxed state. And the first one is, ask your mind or your body, what does it want you to know right now? What message, subtle or big, has been wanting to come into your field of awareness? Maybe it's a message around who you are, how you are with yourself, your relationships, your work, your parenting, whatever it happens to be. What message comes to you? And this is the first pop-up. We call it an intuitive pop-up. I in realign is for intuitive pop-up. Trust what comes to you. No judgment. Society, your conditioning, your upbringing might have led you to judge a lot of who you are and how you are. And here you get to allow whatever comes forward with welcoming arms. And then take a deep breath in. Exhale. Beautiful. The G in realign stands for gratitude. In this moment, what can you feel gratitude for? Maybe it's gratitude that you actually get to feel your body, even if what you felt was uncomfortable. Knowing that you feel your body, you're moving towards integration, wholeness, and healing. And the N in realign stands for what do you need? So depending on my audience and where I'm doing this, I tend to tailor the need question. So in this context, I would say, what do you need to remember your wholeness? To remember you're a miracle. And if you remember you're a miracle, then we get to remember everybody else's too. Even if on a human level, what they did or we did was incomprehensible, is a part that's still a miracle. And that's a much deeper spiritual conversation. And notice if something comes up with you, within you, like a sensation. As I say that, just be aware, don't judge, breathe, and let it go. And then draw in a deep breath through your nose. Exhale, sigh. Beautiful. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So this is the realign protocol that I encourage people to do every day. And what I usually suggest is you start with 3 deep breaths with an audible exhalation and end with 3 deep breaths with an audible exhalation. And then what happens is as you go through your day, you start to create a deeper intimacy with your body. And as sensations come up, which, Tracy, you labeled as anxiety, you're going to start getting skillful. Well, what does that feel like in my body? Oh, I'm aware of this. And I've given that the label of anxiety, but what if I just attend to the sensations and attend to them lovingly? And instead of saying this doesn't belong, say this belongs right now because this is the time for me to feel it. And then ask yourself, what is the wisdom that needs to come through? What are you grateful for and what do you need? So you do this throughout the day, little 30-second to 2-minute intervals. Then you might be in the middle of an argument with someone and trying to make your point and believe you're right. And you'll take a second to feel your body. And that's going to change your whole experience in your relation. So this is a deep relational skill. It starts with the self, but then it gets to transfer to relations with others.
Wow, this has been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us and taking us through this realignment exercise. I needed it. I really did. I didn't realize I needed it, but I really needed to just stop for a couple minutes and just be.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And if I could give one bit of advice to people out there listening, is just what Tracy said, like take the time throughout the day to stop and be. And one of the ways we do that is just consciously tell yourself, slow down, slow down. Our nervous system is so hyper aroused so much of the time. When you tell yourself, slow down, like slow that step, slow your breath, slow the way you're cooking, slow the way you're eating, slow the way you're talking, you're imprinting your nervous system with a different way of being that can change everything. And this is how we start to change the world and create an environment that's more compassionate, loving, kind, and patient, is with one person at a time.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. Listeners, you can find all of Diana's information below in the show notes. If you're listening to one of our partner stations, releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up Diana's show and all her contact information will be there so that you can go and learn more about what she does. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the next show.